set the air pressure on these devices, you have to make sure that this is pulled outwards so that you can turn it. And start off with the air pressure low by turning this counterclockwise. Make sure it starts off at 0. Once you've done that, you can open this valve. It should stay at 0, and if you turn this clockwise, the pressure is going to go up a little bit, and we eventually want to set it to about 100 kilopascals, but for now I'm going to put it to 0. The next thing you want to do is take this 4mm tubing and connect it to this 4mm connector. Push it in, make sure it hits the bottom, and then you're going to connect that to the single port on the solenoid valve. And it just goes in here, pushes all the way down. So that's the first connection. The next step will be to connect the output from the solenoid valve. The left-hand side is going to be used to extend the piston. So I'm going to place that in here, push it all the way down. And then the second tube is going to be used for retracting. So that's now connected. If I want to test it without any electrical connections, I can do that by pressing these little blue buttons. And don't do it with a pen, we have these devices. This should cause it to retract, but before you do that, you have to make sure you've set the air pressure to between 100 to 150 kilopascals. So 125 should be okay, approximately. All right, the next step is that it's already extended, so I want to retract the piston, bring it back into the cylinder, and I can press this little button to do that. And then if I want to test that it will extend, press this little blue button, and it does extend properly. Make sure that these things don't hit against the sensors. You can adjust it by loosening the nut and moving it back and forth. It should be within about 1 millimeter. Okay, I've disconnected the air supply so that it's out of the way while we're doing the electrical wiring. The first thing to notice is that this sensor here is the inductive sensor, so it detects metals. It shows a picture of a little coil. The other sensor is the capacitive sensor, and it detects any material. So it could be wood, cardboard, water, or even metal. Okay, so to connect these, we have to make 3 connections to each sensor. 24 volts, 0 volts, and Q1 is the output, which is going to go to a light. So I'm going to start off by connecting the 24 volts to each of the 2 sensors. So we want to have 24 volts connected here. And this is where you need the longer wire to go from the sensor to the box, the power supply. All of these things are connected in series, and you have to make sure you have 120 volts AC and that the power is turned on. Once you've got that connected, then we're going to need a wire to ground, and these can be shorter wires. So the 0 volts has to go to the blue. This is the European ground connection. And the other 0 volts to the second point in the box, but I need a little bit longer wire. Right here. Okay, so I have ground connected, I have 24 volts connected, but now I have to take the output of this and connect it to a light. So I'm going to take the extend sensor and connect it to this top light, and the retract sensor, so Q1 must be connected to Q1, is going to go to this light. Okay, oh, I think I wanted to put them both on top so that I ground the other side of the light. So one side of the light has to be connected to plus 24, the other side is going to go to ground. So I'm going to get 2 shorter wires that will go from the other side of the light to ground. And then same thing here to ground. Okay, and so I believe this top light is going to represent the extend, and you can see down here the sensor light is on when the piston is extended, a little yellow light. All right, and then I can just manually, and that's the reason I moved this air supply out of the way, I can just manually move that, and you can see this light comes on, and so does the light in the I/O panel. Might be a little hard to see, but it's on there. If I move it away, it goes off. Okay, so those are all indicating as they should be. To connect the push buttons, and what we're going to do here is connect one side of each of the push buttons to 24 volts. because we want to source current to the solenoid valves, because the solenoid valves are going to have ground connected to one side. So I'm going to connect the ground here, another lead for the other ground. Okay, so to actuate the solenoid valve, the extend and the retract, the other side of the valve must be connected to 24. So I have one side of the switch connected to 24, but that means I need to connect the other side of the switch to 24 and go to one side of the solenoid valve. Okay, and what we're going to do just to test that things work, and hopefully you understand here that the lights are not connected to the switches, so they're going to come from the sensors. So if I press this button, we should see that light comes on this side of the solenoid valve, which is going to be the extent. Okay, nothing's moving now because we don't have any air. And when we press this button, the light for the retract should come on right here, that yellow light. Okay, so it's not, these lights are going to be changed when it is extended and retracted. The next step is to connect the air supply to the solenoid valve, and it's connected to port number 1. And then that goes to the regulator. Make sure it's plugged in all the way, and then turn the air supply on. Slowly is the best way to do it. And then bring up the pressure. Now, you hear some noise there. That's because we don't have the other ports connected. So one of the ports, and this might be a good test, we're going to plug these in. And you'll notice right now, air's coming out of this side. Now, make sure if you're putting your finger in the way of where the air is, it's at a very low pressure, which it is. So I'm going to plug that into the extend, and you saw that it did extend. And then I'm going to plug this into the retract port. And it won't retract, but I want to bring the air pressure up a little bit to maybe 125 kilopascals, somewhere in that range. Now we seem to have everything connected there. Let's just see if when I press the buttons, things work the way they should. This should cause it to, this button here, this should cause it to retract, and the retract sensor is on, the retract light comes on. This should cause it to extend, and it does, and the extend sensor light is on here and up here. So everything seems to be working the way it should. So this is kind of your final setup that you'll have checked. Everything seems to work as it should. One other thing I want to add, though, that this is the capacitive sensor, this is the inductive sensor, but there's also an optical sensor. I'm going to quickly hook this up to plus 24 on one side and ground 0 volts on the other side. And if I want to connect it to a light, well, these lights need 0 volts and 24. So I'm going to connect one side of the light to 0 volts. There it is. And the other side of the light is going to come from the sensor. Now, when this sensor detects something, it outputs 24 volts. So it's a current sourcing. That's why this light has to be grounded. So it'll provide the 24 volts when this detects something that's reflected back to the sensor. So when I bring my hands close, it turns on the light. If I take it away, it turns off the light. Same way these sensors did. And there's actually indicator lights here that tell you the activity of the sensor. And all the sensors must have their outputs connected to Q1. So they need 0 volts, 24 volts, and Q1. Now the very last thing I want to show you is when you have to disconnect the pneumatic tubing, you have to make sure to press in on these little blue tabs, press downwards, and then the tubing should come out very easily. Probably a good idea to turn the air off when you do that. Let's try it again. So take that out. Same thing here. You have to press on these blue rings downwards on them and then pull this out. Should be very easy to pull out if you're doing it correctly. And that's the end of the demo. Hope you get everything to work.